A description of the time spent on the path of Allah, Part 4 and conclusion. We finished last time with a discussion about who the strangers were and Abu Ali's return from the Leeds Mosque and going back to the centre of the TJ in the UK, Dewsbury, also known as the North faction of the TJ movement. So what Abu Ali says is, as soon as we finished eating, the talk started up again. I decided to nip outside for some fresh air, and there he saw members of the TJ who were smoking cigarettes. He described how he judged them and was disapproving, and he felt indignant. So he's judging people here. This is the mentality that TJ brought out in him. And he concludes, I was delighted to finally see Shafiq the next day. I wanted to know if he had been through a similar experience as me, and whether he too felt worried about some of the things that had happened. He said how wonderful it had been, and how he could not wait to go out on his next Jamaat. I was relieved to get back home. I felt a little nervous. Things looked different. My priorities had shifted. I was less concerned about this life and far more focused on the next life. I grew my beard. I wore a long white jilbab, which is like a long white um, gown, and a cap. I not only prayed all my compulsory prayers, but I prayed all the extra prayers too. I began fasting every Monday and, of course, always brushed my teeth with a miswak. I was determined to keep in my mind the heightened state of fear of God that I had felt in the mosque. My friends and family were at first a little surprised by the even more devoutly religious Hassan. Hassan is Abu Ali, and humoured my somewhat obsessive attention to every tiny detail of Islam. However, I soon found that being back in the real world gave me a more balanced perspective, and the sense of anxiety and fear gradually subsided as I realized that the TJ's obsession with form and ritual was a distortion or a distorted perception of Islam. I came to appreciate what the Quran said, that God does not task a soul beyond what it can bear, and that the needs of this world and the needs of the next world did not have to be in conflict. I began to seek a more sophisticated and deeper appreciation of Islam than the TJ offered. That is the end of Abu Ali's story. So, in this section, I would like to conclude um, this whole series, and the underlying theme in this series has been the fact that the TJ is a house divided. Abu Ali's story gives you a good example as to why the TJ can no longer maintain its program as it has been going for nearly 100 years now. It cannot maintain that program because, as Sikand mentioned, they are declining, and they are declining because they refuse to evolve. And to conclude this, I will mention 4 ways that I believe the TJ is divided. Number one, they are highly divided because there is a tension between authentic Islam, which most Sunni Muslims believe to be the Quran and the Sunnah, the Hadith, and the way of the companions, and their blind, rigid association with texts that contain huge amounts of fabricated material like the Faza'il A'mal, Tablighi Nisab, and some of the perverse texts by Ashraf Ali Thanvi, texts that contain absolute perversion, sexual and immoral perversion within them. That's the first way that they're divided. The second way is that they are divided between modernity, and Abu Ali mentioned this in his conclusion, the demands of modern life versus what the uh, distorted form of Islam that Tabligh offered. So the Tabligh live in the 19th century, and they need to be pulled basically into the 21st century. That's the second division, modernity versus 19th century village Islam. The third division is the political and the attitudinal differences within the UK between the North TJs, those based at Dewsbury, and the South. The South have shown, as Pieri mentioned, the ability to adapt, but there's this natural tension and conflict between the North and the South because some are more progressive than others. Specifically, the Southerners are more progressive than the Northerners. And the last one, which there are many articles online, talks about the divide in terms of leadership, the power struggle, and the wrangles for power that have played out in the media recently. And there's been cases of recordings of the leaders of the respective different factions showing less than appropriate Islamic rhetoric and manners. This is spilled out, and violence has been seen across the major centres. Places like Nizamuddin in Delhi, Tongi in Bangladesh, Raiwand in Lahore, Pakistan. I don't know about any cases of violence in Dewsbury, but if it's happened in those other major centres of the TJ, then who's to say that it won't happen in the UK? So this group, this section, this sect, this cult that has over 700 mosques within the United Kingdom, that has, I would say, hundreds of thousands of followers in the United Kingdom and millions across the world, needs to be reformed. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be recognized. Stay tuned for many more videos.